Today we're going to be looking at natural selection and evolution in an intro to evolution. You're going to be understanding today that nature is what's deciding if an animal's traits are favorable or not. And given enough time and enough pressure on these traits, you can end up with an organism changing into a new species. Let's first take a look at some background into evolution. Intro to evolution, natural selection. What is evolution? Evolution is defined as a change in species over time. For example, a group of species that changes into another can happen quickly with bacteria or over millions of years. Evolution explains the current existing organisms that are on the planet. It also is created into more of a tree or a web as opposed to a line. Nature decides if a species at the time is successful or not, and it depends on the traits the organism has. Organisms have different traits and characteristics, which leads them to being successful or not. Some organisms have adaptations like camouflage that allow them to be successful. The driving force of evolution is natural selection. Natural selection determines what traits are favorable and which traits are not favorable. A favorable trait will allow an organism to get food and reproduce. Unfavorable traits will end up to the organism becoming sick or unable to get food and becoming starved or eaten. What is natural selection? Natural selection is the process where organisms better adapted to their environment survive longer and produce more offspring. Organisms better suited for their environment can reproduce. The more offspring an organism can produce and pass on the traits to makes it a more successful organism. Organisms that cannot pass on their traits are considered unfavorable by natural selection. The more offspring an organism has, the more fit they are. Survival of the fittest. An organism's fitness or how well it's in environment doesn't matter in terms of strength or size, but rather the amount of offspring it can have. More offspring by an organism means that it's better suited and can survive longer. Those with less offspring, however, are considered not as fit and may eventually die out. Now, don't confuse having few offspring with being unsuccessful. The goal is how many species can survive within the offspring. So for example, while tigers may only have 1 or 2 cubs at a time, if both cubs are able to survive to adulthood, that's considered a lot more successful than an organism that has 50 babies, yet all of them die. Keep that in mind as it's an important detail. It doesn't matter how strong you are, it's all about baby amounts. For example, bulky big rabbit A lives for 15 years and has 3 offspring that survive. Wimpy B rabbit for 5 years and only has 30 offspring that survive. But rabbit B is more fit because it has more offspring that survive. Once again, survival of the fittest is not how strong, but how many offspring. Remember, the organism does not pick if its traits are successful or not. Only nature can decide that. Nature is the ultimate decider if traits are favorable or not. Sometimes traits are considered favorable, and it may change at another time to make both traits unfavorable. So something to consider. Did humans follow the same rules of natural selection anymore, or have we broken the rules with all our creations? Not only that, what do we call it with animals that we've bred instead? Is that still natural selection, or is that something else? Talk to you guys tomorrow.